I'm soaring, friends. I'm Vitaly. Donald Trump today is robed in the body of a low state of his sovereign visit to Britain. An unprecedented friend of the president's visit from the United States to Britain. The greedy of American presidents is mute in Britain for 2 hours with such a protocol sovereign visit, and unprecedented. I'm sideways, and Trump's appearance on the president's quadriplegic landing turned him to the Oval Office. Unprecedented. I have a history with the received Tilka states one president before Donald Trump. As you know, Stephen Grover Cleveland was suddenly removed by the president of such a tradition of power without a visa was not. So the whole story can be a counselor really, I'm not analogues. Well, to the point that the Brits themselves were numb, it wasn't that Trump's visas were the most. The fact that they, of course, the American president before various spectacular ceremonies. His adoration were entrusted with the royal family, Trump's glorification. The British are helping us with the coins of the gentry, laying new angles with the received states. And for the difference in the mood of the American president and the moment, as we know. The tariff is not Skoda for the British economy and the American. But the economy and Britain find the most ruinous solutions about Brexit in not tired. It is unlikely that Schvidka can be seen in that situation of the deceased. It is more economical to reciprocate both with the received states and for the British order. For the UDA to the Lord of absolutely catastrophic management in Brexit with the Conservative Party and political self-confidence. So it is possible that the motives of British Prime Minister Keir Starmer requests to Donald Trump to the UK. And with such another state visit, calling for a visit is not protocol. However, with the political activities of Donald Trump, and it's so wonderful, of course, that the legacy of such a visit. For us, everything was important to the fact that we take all these trips of Donald Trump and oysters and envious politicians on ourselves through the prism of what discounts and can be poured into the American president, from the point of view of his left to our Ukraine, to Russian-Ukrainian guilt. I think that all these times about the fact that the King of Britain can float into the point of view of the American president, it seems to be in reality. I'm in the gym. Respecting Donald Trump can't swim in because his system. We are talking about she is absolutely verified, and not those who, swimming into the fields of a political saint before Trump. Extremely from the point of view, the British king cannot spit on him either. I also have the president with the royal family received in the state in St. Petersburg, to the fact that Trump, respecting the type of authoritarian, exiled Vagu on the Duma, involve us and the powerful Yak look like sanctity. And point of view, of course, still Russian President Putin is one of Donald Trump, and nothing wondrous. Mind with a Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. The mind with the Belarusian Achelnik Lukashenko on the mind with the head of the People's Republic of China, and the General Secretary in the Communist Party Xi Jinping, calling for more and more economical mutual. I sit down with important people in the state with China for Trump, they accept yaks, I would say. And with such constant piety and respect. And overgrown, it can be clearly said even before those people, the sprat of the leaders of democratic powers is also introduced. And Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu himself, practically ignoring the American president of his policy, is traditionally important for Trump, bags with such and the power of Kateriki. Expensive, and in exchange for economical preferences. Well, and extremely Prime Minister of Cleaning Viktor Orban. Another event is laid out, and obviously for Donald Trump. It is obvious that in those categories of people, not Maya, not the British King, not the Prime Minister and Britain's Keir Starmer, not our President Vladimir Zelensky, all these people on Donald Trump swam. Nikola could not, and Nikola will not be able to. And it means that with the point of view of the American president, it is not possible to oppose. And that we will talk to you about those Yakvin is put before the Russian-Ukrainian guilt. The fact that really floating in on Donald Trump and all the ambushes, the dirty press, the dirty elections. All this is still important for Trump in terms of reaction to his activities, really overestimate the instrument. What we are talking about, of course, is that Trump was perfectly notified that the Democrats are in the midterm elections before Congress from the states they received. Windows Shvidko will pretend to be a Kulgava jock, just really chase. Impeachments and Congress are tools for initiatives and for making decisions. And again, there is a real road for his ship's pursuit after sewing up the Oval Office. The fact that in those situations, it is not like under the sofa that the term can be heard in the Oval Office. But in the Oval Office, Donald Trump does not have the prospect of bogus ship rumors. And this is extremely necessary for him. And, of course, even in those situations, the Republican candidate will be able to win the presidential election. With the results obtained in the state, the Democratic candidate in the upcoming presidential election for Donald Trump is not just a political human catastrophe and a reference drama, and with an unknown ending for him and for his family. Because this is still, and all this will still be a front door for those people in Vlad's spending on disaster with disaster. And honed for success. And beatings and Vlad, they're not looking weak. It is clear to him that Trump's cola is being tortured about the fact that, thinking about the Russian-Ukrainian war, about what you choose with Putin, it will be, I would say, optimistic that this will complete the Russian-Ukrainian guilt. It's just that we are diluting Donald Trump like this, having already destroyed a historic friend's visit from Britain. I think that the words of the American president on board the liner will be absolutely, and to everyone, that London is going to sort out in detail with you, of course, the alleged political situation before the new protrusion of the American president. You balk even on those of the oysters from King Charles. Charles III spoke at the tract acceptance in honor of Donald Trump. The king is about solidarity from Ukraine and to help Ukraine. And it was one of the most important foreign policy thermal power plants, and it was possible for the British monarch to share her zustrici with the president with the staff received. We are, of course, not yet the words of the king. About the king on such zustrix in the British order in the greedy in the whole situation. The manifestation is about the fact that from Ukraine it is cut for the monarch and for the British Yuli. PPR even before that, Trump, at a split press conference from Kiev old. In principle, repeating from the point of view that respecting the Russian-Ukrainian war will go into, they are sewn up. Forgive me, they're all mythical. Trump, you are now pointing the butt of the one I gave to his peacemaking. However, the Russian-Ukrainian fault was revealed to be the most folding. Trump, who thought to him, will complete the Russian-Ukrainian guilt, and I think that he will also declare his own. To what is on his good side with the President of the Russian Federation. Trump, benefit, bags I, as a rule, I am on a Yaku brought to the dope to the cabin with the KGB. And just to have a Zeroshka on the shoulder straps. And hundreds of reference bags in between Trump and Putin. Yaku Trump is not fond of tagging. And in principle, Trump spoke, disappointed with Putin. I am absolutely convinced that Trump's kidney plan, I am extremely convinced. that the American president was going to act after the elections and Putin, and add more Russian-Ukrainian guilt on Putin's comfortable mind. And we know in detail that Trump is practically not in the plan of Ukraine. European partners in our Ukraine gathered sanctions against Russia in such a rank, but helping Putin can be seen to break his own, and with 3.5 hands. And the economy. The curved Russian status of Crimea and the territories occupied by Putin was elected. I do not think that I continued for a long hour, for I do not know what ideas for Canada, Greenland. The willingness to recognize the Ukrainian territories annexed by Russia is extremely still. Trump is now his stay at the president's landing for the first time. Having learned Moroccan sovereignty, actually annexed by Morocco, Zahid Sakharovich, the precinct called the Bogama of Ukraine, and the retinue of the independent power with the territories are solely controlled by the Moroccan temples, and she will come to Morocco. The torment of that on discounts has become debatable for Western Ukrainians. Trump, in order for Morocco to be seen as a diplomatic bag from Israel, having learned Morocco's sovereignty over Western Sahara. I am Bacha and nothing from the pouring point of view of international law. And the offensive administration froze to the status of Zahid Sahara. But the administration is already visible by becoming the minister of Zakordina on the right of Morocco, who got stuck from the sovereign secretary with the pro received in the state. The fact that speaking for autonomy Zahidnaya sugar in the warehouse. Morocco has a precedent that is about Trump, and the obvious collapse of the tests of international law is briefly private and praiseworthy. It is obvious, I think, that Trump respected that the knowledge of the Crimea to the Russian is still allowed to be practical in sanctions are locked up for Barack Obama's watch, starting with Barack Obama. Really on him, on Putin, so that into the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front. Putin in the principles of his tortures from Ukraine, and I give Putin. He was finished off seriously by our power, after Trump's cadence ends in the 2029 kind. So that Trump also talks about the fact that his stay at the landing in Persia and his friend are different. I was not there and Putin finished. You can see your economy and your ksheni are filled with auto dollars. And you can see your gas bags from Europe again. Well, that's what. The chain from the very cob below is doomed to complete failures, filled with fiascos. Because today's Putin is not about pennies, and the torture of pennies Putin has long been for himself, and for his own. You actually own Russia, and Trump has nothing. Who else can get the Russian eye? Yak Kola Trump shut up with the situation, and Putin actually ignores his appearance about the fact that I blame him, that he will succeed. I think that Shvidku friend and phone Razmav with Putin led, that Putin is elected Vagu on the proposition. This has become obvious after the Russian official and his American colleagues and Marx and other American fiasco. Trump is not given Ukraine by the American European media and the American European. And he is afraid of them. There is still afraid of America's elections and electoral democracy. We can adore Trump according to our you. I'm Tilke. America, electoral democracy. Trump of Ukraine in 12 just from Kola Trump, saying that Putin licked his singer easier, still Putin Zagoli he is not tied. Most likely in the pack, as we know about the details of Trump's political biography. Putin will not be on his plans. It was clear that Putin was on his side. Putin was again for Trump. I was with him, and all the illogic. There were still Russian soldiers from Ukrainian, we still Trump once. By calling Russia aggressors, we are marking such a diplomatic wash, from his point of view, do not miss the whole thing. And that there will be a pro-Russian Ukrainian war. We don't know what Trump is basking about, and I don't think about anything. The fact that there is no allegedly real process. Allegedly in the hall about the fact that the plans were practically taken into the frozen process. There is no preparation extremely before the bilateral summit between the President of Russia and Ukraine. Ratsmova about the bilateral summit ended and after Putin, who said ready primates in Moscow, of course, hung over him. There is still nothing constructive there, but ready to meet with Putin of Moscow. We, of course, are still the Russian president for the clay of adoration to meet with the Ukrainian. If I had forgotten their minds and the political reality we have long sought, I would have said the Normandy summit of the 2019. I want to tell you what I'm saying, that Putin's oyster, and I'm still on the most such a thought. I would say so. I am still an oyster of Putin and reason with Trump. Tilky, in the situation of the Russian president, you decide that without carrying out such an oyster, you cannot continue the war on new weapons and powers. And then on such an oyster cottage to give greedy practical results in order to date Trump. And now for the non-imposition of new serious sanctions of the pro-Russian Federation, and not in Ukraine. For the Tesh situation for Putin, it will turn out not to be a Coke on the screen to the fact that Trump was talking to Britain about the fact that Europeans will be ready to help Ukraine for the purchase of American waste. Already 4 conversations, the reset received in the state within the framework of the program has been blocked. The Europeans have already delivered the American to Ukraine. And this means that there is a new mechanism against it. So, the mechanism will not be, and I would say, richly billionth. I was in the mechanism of amusing the Trump media at the landing of the President of the United States, Joseph Biden. The Scarlet Mind. I am absolutely in those situations on after all, and the mechanism for Putin is about the fact that he failed to fully grasp the idea in Ukraine. So, extremely Trump would not want American carpenters' gifts. The presidency received in the state because the completion of the Russian-Ukrainian guilt on Russia is a test of national interests. The most received in the state, and Trump actually these national interests. And this also protects Tilky to the fact that 4 pennies on Russian-Ukrainian brooms, torture is not so good. It is absolutely obvious that we can work with you in such situations. So we can say that the mechanism for the day of the reset is still about, and Trump does not oppose such a mechanism. And Tesh is up to an important situation, tied up from those blame. And we will still be our European partners on the still long-standing drone attacks on Poland. For, of course, discounts are important at the moment, tied up from the harassment of Ukraine. And will be allocate and bill pennies for purchased American spro. I will honestly tell you that I think that in a situation tied up with Russian-Ukrainian guilt, allegedly of course, what makes the stream and Russia an important moment for Europeans. His fault was a serious point, from the point of view of how I will develop the situation with our networks below for the most Americans. So let's think another moment, really under so otherwise. TPPR even before the sanctions. Sanctions and a completely new situation. The fact that Trump is not elected for their rights does not mean sanctions against Russia. And you know that it is practical not to yak new sanctions against Russia on the wire now about in the Oval Office and a visit to London. Tests showing that I do not want new sanctions to lock up those who may be, and they are still on sanctions on the Europeans. And here it is not possible to say yet Trump is not there yet really in the situation of cola. Continue to buy often in Ukraine, Europe. An ally of Trump, and the cleaning of the Russian NAFTA looks so clean. And all of Ukraine, including themselves, with the receipt of the state and Ukraine. Indian car products from Russian NAFTA. Then it is extremely difficult to make fun of that, and at a discount. And the Russian budget in the income of a high-rise Maybach is not worth it. I have already got a visa to pay for the rights in sanctions against China and India, and to whitewash the Russian budget of my income. There is also Delhi and Beijing, with complete lack of resiliency, gave to by Russian NATO for the Ukrainians. A political torture of their bags from Moscow. To leave the torture of the fact that Russia can destabilize, and for food important to leave. Has not yet taken the fate of the results of such destabilization. For New Delhi, it is important to buy Russian naphtha from Moscow. Moscow has not yet uppy package. So that it does not become so that China's Tilki is a single vent of Putin's income. And the Prime Minister of India is a realist politician, on the fashion render, of course. The heirs of that are still adding bags to the Russian Federation. You have been banging on Dyakov and Donald Trump and Putin almost overnight for airing, and your day at home. I'm talking about the historically strategic partner risers, and the essence of foreign policy from Russia. On the render fashion, however, Trump's prograft is grafted into his not on the Russian-Ukrainian track. And having run Putin to the same end of the war, I'm in this, I said, an obvious trot to the style of the Indian Prime Minister. I am actually sponsoring the Russian budget and the state for Russia to continue the guilt in the short term. In the mind of those who do not know, Russia has an income. That's the whole point for you, not from the fact that you happen. The way Trump has a clear formula, what else is the mud on NAFTA? In the case of Putin of our choice, I basically get on food. I fell into NAFTA. It's not the kind of strength I could pull on NAFTA. Someone else tells you that it is possible to use a tire there, then you simply did not notify this yak tin on the light market, adding up what you bought from a real such product 10 to 1500. Speculative in speculative markets, the gentry is clearly not talking about Maybach prospects. Extremely in those situations, there may be a fall, a sharp rise in the demand for NAFTA. We have not had such a process for a long time, and are absolutely clearly aware of it. So in those situations, we are perfectly aware that discounts are important for us so that the sanctions test on Russia continues. And I'll tell you honestly, I sent the weather here with the idea of my hour. And calling the shelling of the Russian at the autopyrydny plant sanctions against Russia. The fact that he really respects the greatest sanctions against Russia. In order for the Kremlin to think about the completion of the Russian-Ukrainian guilt. Strikes on Russian refineries. And there will also be strikes on Russian refineries, and that Russia will and bring out for auto-shooting actions than refueling Russian tanks. And there will also be problems with the Russian whiskey fishing. It will also be possible to extremely and richly the strongest not sanctions. But forever will be for the rights with the received states of Europe. There's also Trump for carrying out new sanctions against the Russian Federation, I'll be Tilki. And I still respect these sanctions cannot be changed, and I am not put to the President of Russia, and she has become forever. No one is honestly torturing. And Putin is on stability and pay for those who are ready to go to the Russian-Ukrainian front in Ukrainians. For a reason. Ideologues are not for their fate. And on the values, I think, you cut. On still thinking about the guilt of the Russian skin of the Russian whopper on the one who wants to make money and here. So you and I have given Trump in this idea, nothing will happen. But one more important point needs to be said, that at a time the Europeans will be ready. For the 19th package of sanctions against Russia have already been prepared on the table of the European Commission. And that about Donald Trump's position, there may be sanctions on Russia, and about close and energy sponsors. And I will also write down the project to the Europeans. I'm just the Naftogaz sector, and I want them to be given to demonstrate to Donald Trump. All the economic sanctions you block the most to his head and friends and Orban and Fitz, then the situation may be rotten for us. Because Trump in order not to show his wool when hiring. And they will be turned to cleaning and Slovakian in order for them to arrive, they bought Russian for so. And from the point of view of income in the Russian budget, nothing is a betrayal of the principles of admission. Well, and from the point of view of income in the Russian budget, I'm still Trump himself will really be ready to impose tariffs on India and China for a full benefit, and there are no tariffs yet. So not at once, we already know that it will blow out consultations about the fact that tariffs for India without any Indian, I would say, Diron Zustrik. Any Indian readiness was purchased by the Russian Nafty. Already today in the week to talk about such tariffs. He also marks tariffs for China, and there have been contributions for a long time, and not about. And I don't believe that Trump, and in fact quarrels, because the separation into a tough, I would say, attack from the side of Xi Jinping. And for seeing off for the American economy at Rico nasal metals with the received staff at deliver magnets and Trump buckets. Although honestly it seems that the information appeared in the business press with the information received in the state, but with the truth. And they rarely wasted ground metals, they did not waste a magnet on Trump's tariff. Just out and went, that's the gentry through Ukraine. They're through the same India, through Malaysia. Well, it's obvious that this was before the Grove, and Trump will be afraid of inheriting for business. What with getting a staff for such strategic products? Well, before the speech. Already tomorrow in Ranta. Well, tomorrow in the rant, behind Washington now, Trump will dilute with the head of the People's Republic of China. Here. Link and not hanging out Russian-Ukrainian guilt. Trump will dilute and Xi Jinping, even before they bought a TikTok from the received states. You know what is put down to the tag of the manipulative tool. In London, I say, I give a TikTok. Winning the presidential election manipulation, all social. Well, it is known that Trump and Xi Jinping will negotiate a tariff for the People's Republic of China, and with the resulting state. And here you are at the torture for you. On Trump about the fact that they are ready for the wires are sanctions against China and India. In another hour, I add Xi Jinping about the fact that they will be all containers. And Shukai himself is smeared, and with the head of the People's Republic of China. Well, this is already a good torture, as you, of course. So I think it's going to be real. Opposed to the test, and I am so, and an important moment in this story. To the fact that we are perfectly clear even in those situations. I'll explain the goat. Indeed, there is still a rich deposit of Chinese-purchased Russian naphtha. And I'm telling you, I don't believe that the People's Republic of China has bought for it the moment of a political, one of the most important strategic allies. So I'm going with this important moment. I once again tell us that in those situations, once about the tariffs about China, India, and eat higher for Trump, the overwhelming reaction is to go into the distance on the European Union with adoration of them really for the wire. Well, look at the American president in London, for Britain. Then I will dilute Xi Jinping in Washington, so this policy will continue. I ask you, those who are not subscribed to the channel, sign it, I will be grateful to you. You know we're a demon. Channel millions, skin you to sign such an important pash in Nesik in the challenge, put in a podobake. Rather, what do you think about the statements of the President from the received states, and the tools of the channel will be useful to you. And I'm on the torture. Pan Vitaly, you don't hear Trump either. But the rich are political. I think the doctors are rich in the patient and in the fact that they are now engaged in the reception. Rejoices people. I am respectful information for thinking people. And what we are hanging out with you about is Donald Trump's statement. And we can realistically talk about the meaning for people who are from outside the exhibition. About their ideas, their vchinki are important to you and me. "3.5 years will rise, and Ukraine left Russia during the warring period. Real Zakonchin, right up to the moment when we do not understand that the Russian economy and demography has cracked, and the President of the Russian Federation on this war and on Ukraine with a political map. And the important moments, the moment of serious you try, and the moment you try the real information. We live in the light. A beacon of idiocy and propaganda. And they demand to fight for the ruble. The claims are one skin moment to think, and prot I will interpret, that we are with you. And the greatest pile is not true. He won't hack, he says. Of course, I'm developing a go still on you and me. And the check you will be able to squeeze in, of course, in the greatest disaster. And my task, I'm a journalist, I'm still you survived. I can't create and such a mind for people, I'm not in tune for a healthy gloom. I'm not an ex. She is alone with him in the dark, not falling from the 10th cook. But he wants to live and fight and survive, and I can. And why is it necessary to think about such claims? The statements of Donald Trump, including their, also shed the greatest nuclear attempts with participation. And the greatest nuclear attempts with participation. There are two of them shooting on the topic of the world at war. Then I'm on our wall on the statements of the leaders of the two nuclear superpowers. Potential I can and street people. Of course, Ukraine's right to a legal moral right to extort the signatories of the Budapest Memorandum from their nuclear arsenal, in the form of compensation, is also another one. Moral rights of Ukraine Maya. And in Ukraine, live absolutely economical, whiskey deposits come and breathe on the political map retinue. Tilky, I will not continue to help them. All these you and compensation are not in art issued. But I'm also your receptionist, just to talk and think, and you find the Ukrainian economy. The economy on, one might say, a piece-by-piece breath. You find Ukraine, head gates alone, do not think about 4-1. And that Ukraine itself cannot expose itself, but the weasel is still acceptable. You can also think about the plant. And still think realistically, and as squeezed out and darkened by the end of military ideas. I will stay in a normal Ukraine-centric democratic European, with a direct power. I know I'm going to the piece of such a power from the point of view of the fact that the prevention of Maybit is absolutely not in the brightness. I will not be prevention yet, the temple conflict from Moscow. And NATO, then the agreements with such Ukraine to France, in the UK. Even before the deployment of their nuclear arsenal on our territory. From Poland for the conversation, she had enough of the fate taken from the nuclear distributed. The fact is that the elements of the French nuclear complex, including Vyskov, the process of President King Nawrodzki, was on the territory of Poland, and we need those French elements to be on the territory of Ukraine. That there were no sanctions about us, so that the Western leaders themselves would not think that Russia occupied them. And there was no problem with their nuclear ambitions. I still don't sweat the blame for Russia behind the wall. We will be behind the wall, and the 2 Ukrainians will be all yours physically. And yours means that there was a nuclear dump on the other side of the wall, whose reset helps us. But you don't pass, which is elementary. Here we start on not about Trump, and put out the hand you are getting off the Nobel Prize. Ticket Trump Putin. I respect in the audience for the 3rd time about the Nobel Prize, absolutely child. Trump is not a greedy chance from the Nobel Prize. To the fact that the Nobel Committee is formed because of a political opponent, and greedy stray committee members Nicola will not vote for the Nobel Prize of the president with the received staff. At the end, his counselor may not be from their point of view, a kind of peacemaker, in fact, of aggression. They won't be seen in the light. The Yakovlev Prize. I want to explain this purely technical speech. Baba and I had sex with Trump. Choke on the calendar choke. Choked. I choked. Well, here I am already a conspiracy. I'm going to Rick on calendars. Write in the comments I am to Rick. 2025. And the Nobel Prize in Jovny grew up there 2025, give 4 2024 Rick. 4 and Kim would boof Donald Trump in the 2024 kind. Kim was Panikovsky before the revolution. Donald Trump in the 2024 kind was involved in various ship trials. Fought for the nomination of a candidate for the presidency with the Republican Party received in the state, but fought well. Winning a lot of ship trials, what did he lose? And don't hang out that you happen to be from the Nobel Prize. Trump, I'm on a diet in the 2025 lesson, in which there are serious sums. Autry and Tilka's Nobel Prize, in 2026 kind, for 25. Here we are in Jov 2026 box, we will talk about what happened to Trump there. And the Nobel Prize for 2020. And I'm for the process, of course. Those people are expelling Trump, and essentially expelling him on the offensive. Marshall's plan for Ukraine. Plans for an economical kind of Ukraine are extremely frequent plans for the European integration of our Ukraine, and for what it is necessary that the ideas for the objective presented end. And Kola upload these ideas, ways of peaceful withdrawal between Russia and Ukraine. I hope that it will be packed in such a way that I will not defend the fate of the Union. I doubt that I will not capitulate on Rocky's feet, and it was all capitulative. Then we will be able to talk to you extremely about T, supposedly looking like the situation with the Marshall's Plan. So everything is needed for the wine, and richly classy. Well, besides the Marshall, investors will still attack Ukraine through the rickshaw, and add up pennies with the bombing. And the territory of their facilities. And we can still exile Yak, and not Bachu. What does it mean to your thinking by Putin all over Russia in a bunker about preparing for the third light guilt? Well, I think that in Russia, it can be led away on the tilka of light guilt. For the exchange of the nature of guilt. Guilt will pretend to be technically less and less. Tilky still sounded from the arena, on a windy alarm and a drone. I sweeps, and during the period of Russian-Ukrainian guilt, in the shelter of not a drone, buckets of the nature of guilt. The third light guilt of the Russian Federation has not yet removed them, the guilt is on the way out of Ukraine. With the European Ukraine it is still possible, and in a dose. It is necessary to hide other people's drones, that they will fly into the territory of Russia. Ukrainian drones are already flying. This is absolutely the right policy. And they themselves need control over Europe, even on their feet, and will pass technical progress on Russia, we do not know. From the point of view of the SPRO, we do not know. I have a check on us in 3 or 4 months, and I am a Russian. We also have a Czech and a Russian. This is still a bunker is needed. He will also say about our pre-European Union. Prisker for us on the side of our friends. I'll buy more. The test about the cob of these cluster Ukraine will not cut out. I want to say. Integration to the European Union style of Russian-Ukrainian wine. Just of an imitation nature. No one is ready to accept Ukraine before the European Union will not pass the cordon of our Ukraine and territory. The fact that the European Union is unlikely to primates to the warehouse of Ukraine on the territory. To us, the important temple discounts did not continue, they are carried out and effectively. And from the point of view of the extremely important moment filed in this. Until the moment of Vladika's betrayal is absolutely real, then these are not any real problems tied up from the pace of our education to the European Union, because I repeat once again, the head of Ukraine's reluctant European integration and what we cannot yet get. On the Russian-Ukrainian fault, and in Ukraine such guarantees have been highlighted, the fault of the RASPO can be completed. Well, you are not in the process of injected guilt, but I am the process of continuing the war. No one for the guilt poured into Trump's head. That's it. I still have the right, and left radical forces will go to power all over Europe, which we can respect the project of the European Union, and in 3 blows to Russia for the first time. It may be so, which is absolutely real. And all the setups are talking about the fact that Russia has found an effective tool for the European project. The gentry is a right radical and a left radical and will not be united among themselves. In other words, to get to power in Europe, and the very idea of European unity, even on the European continent itself, to the fact that the collapse of the European Union, it's not just the collapse of an economical Zadia. So is the European Union. A single recipe was allowed to the Europeans in the environment on the 20th for a friend, the holy wine is not one. I will guarantee you on the European project, you will beat Europe like it was before the European Union. Not me, as we could talk about the United Europe project. Tom Putin wants Russian-Ukrainian guilt. The project and the gates for in Europe, Russia pretended correctly to be the gendarme of Europe. And before the Kremlin, the Russian pro-government armies were calmed down by the enemies of Russia. Here to choke on the cleaners. From the Cobb, the army of Field Marshal Paskovich conquered the Ugric freedom, at the Hill fought for a powerful state, with a prominent one. According to Marshal Zhukov's army, Ugric freedom. Kola at the Hill fought with the Radian Union. ATPR. Ugric freedom is also a Russian NAFTA. And such stories can be written about the skin from the Ukraine of Central Europe. There are situations depending on your essence. And the chidri of the iron of the European project. Head fear of Russia, especially in Central Europe. A friend of Baidu Ukraine is further to the west, and the Europeans are afraid of their fear in the pub. And their belief that Russia is at a distance before them is absolutely right. NATO Secretary General Mark is still behind the unwinding hour of Putin's rocket flight hour of missiles. Even before Lisbon, even before London, even before Warsaw. So bang, nothing will be heard yet. Well, this is such a reality. The third one is Russian-Ukrainian wine. Russian-Ukrainian wine on the Willow Gosha is an instrument of the breakup of Europe. To that I am in 2020 another kind in Europe to cut the blame. For all the sanctions. Give Ukraine everything it is possible not to be beaten by a nuclear strike. To the fact that the descendants and the Russian-Ukrainian guilt will be so catastrophic that you will tell them it's about a nuclear strike. End all your monstrous suffering, fools. No one is extremely Great Dane at the rumors, and now a new act of the bloody ballet is already beginning. Migration problems brought the Russian-Ukrainian blame to that demand. The far-right collapse, including the influx of American far-right Trumpists and Europe, we all got into the subject. Not that we are on Europe, there is a strong China here. Diakuyu. Subscribe to the channel, I'll tell you another skin who will subscribe. The participant of the challenge, that we put millions on the channel, give it. What do you think? It's just that Trump's statements are not the tools of the channel, and it's important that he helps the Ukrainian army. We have a difficult period of the Russian-Ukrainian confrontation baked. Today they are at the front. I'm often on exuding people. Out and the main guarantor of the savings of the Ukrainian state and sovereignty, and on the gentle, and I'm here for you now.